Velated, thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. For decades, West Africa has been caught in a struggle over its financial destiny. The story of a unified West African currency began over 30 years ago when the Economic Community of West African States, known as Ecowas, proposed a single currency called the ECO. The goal was to remove trade barriers, boost economic independence, and bring non-CFA nations like Nigeria and Ghana together with French-speaking countries using the CFA franc. However, for years, the ECO remained stuck on paper. Giant economic disparities across the region made it impossible to achieve. Countries were required to meet strict economic rules, such as keeping inflation down and budget deficit low. While Nigeria struggled with volatile oil prices and high inflation, French-speaking nations were tied to the CFA franc, which relied on a fixed exchange rate granted by France. This created a complete deadlock, as non-CFA nations refused to join a currency tied to Paris, and French-speaking nations hesitated to walk away from the stability of the CFA franc. The political dynamic shifted dramatically when political crisis erupted in the Sahel region. Following military coups, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso formed the Alliance of the Sahel States (AES) and announced their departure from Ecowas. Furthermore, leaders in these nations began taking steps towards launching their own sovereign, resource-backed currency to completely replace the CFA franc. This move placed immense pressure on established regional leaders, forcing them to accelerate long-delayed currency reforms or risk losing public trust to rival political movements in the region. This intense climate set the stage for the historic announcement by the President Alassane Ouattara of Ivory Coast. Speaking in his capacity as the President in office of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, President Alassane Ouattara announced a major agreement between member states to reform the financial architecture of French-speaking West Africa and lay the groundwork for the ECO. In his address, President Ouattara outlined three major systematic changes to the region's financial setup. First, the CFA franc will officially change its name to the ECO, marking a formal transition away from a post-colonial monetary identity. Second, member states will no longer be required to keep 50% of their foreign exchange reserves deposited in the French treasury, and the official operations account in Paris will be permanently closed.
The creation of the ECO, the single currency of Ecowas, the economic community of West African states. That is why, in my capacity as the current president of the Conference of Heads of State and Government of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, and by virtue of the mandate given to me by my peers, I am pleased to announce that in agreement with the other heads of state of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, we have decided to reform the CFA franc with the following three major changes. First, the change of the currency name from the CFA franc to the ECO. Second, the cessation of the centralization of 50% of our foreign exchange reserve at the French Treasury and the closure of the operations account. Thirdly, the withdrawal of French representatives from all decision-making and management bodies of the UEMOA. Moreover, this important reform reflects our desire to build our future responsibly in order to attract private investments, create jobs, and continue the economic development of our countries. That is why, at this stage of the reform, the heads of state of the West African Economic and Monetary Union also decided to maintain the fixed parity of our currency with the euro and agreed to maintain the convertibility guarantee.
This change allows West African central banks to store and manage 100% of their reserves independently. Third, all French representatives will completely step down and withdraw from decision-making boards, executive committees, and management bodies within the monetary union, ensuring that monetary policy decisions remain strictly in African hands. President Ouattara emphasized that these reforms reflect a collective determination to take responsibility for the region's economic future. For all these years, our leaders have finally decided to do the needful, simply because AES has decided to move away from them and decided to do that which they have decided to do for 30 years, Agenda 2060-2000, which never yielded any result. But the moment we have a counter, the group called Ecowas has now had the power. Why should we have our 50% of our reserve in France? For all these years, we have decided to be sovereign, or we called ourselves sovereign nations, yet we still keep 50% of our reserves in the French-speaking countries, in France. And when we are going for this same money, we are supposed to be paying interest. Why should we keep 50% of our reserve in Paris when we said we are independent people? And when we are going for this same money, according to the report, you still have to be paying interest on your own money that you have kept there. This step was supposed to be taken for a very long time. Why do we wait when we have another regional bloc trying to do the same thing that we have been preaching for all these years? We are waiting to see how things are going to play out. Because as Africans, for now we need to take drastic measures to liberate our own selves. We don't have to sit down waiting for other people to take steps before we now see that this is the necessary thing that we need to do. We spoke about these things for a very long time. We haven't had a chance to do it. But now that we have another bloc trying to do the same thing, we need to do it so that we wouldn't lose the credibility. Now the young ones are cheering Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. It's like Ecowas is completely out of the scene. So now they want to do it so that it will be like Ecowas decided to do this. But you don't have to wait when we have another one coming into play before you can now agree on your own differences to launch the ECO. You have already told the people that you are leading that it's because of AES trying to launch their own currency. That is why you are doing that. So you have already made it open. It is now obvious to the people that you are doing this ABC because of this. Africa, we need to take our own sovereignty back. We don't have to look for division among ourselves. Then we have to be doing things to counter ourselves. It is good that you are taking this step to move away from saving your 50% of your reserve in Paris. For how long should we continue to be under this colonial bondage? It is time for us to wake up. People must not determine what we should be doing after colonization. But the same thing is still playing. They still try to tell us what to do, who should lead us, what we should do at what point in time. And this is not helping the African growth. And that is why we are always where we are. But anyway, let's see how things are going to play out. What are your thoughts on the steps that ECOWAS has finally decided to take? We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall. And united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world in Africa and in West Africa.